Welcome to Stillwater Chronicles. Tonight, we drift into a quiet harbor town where the sea breathes slowly and the fog never fully disappears. This is a story about stillness, about unseen arrivals, and about the quiet feeling that something has always been waiting just beyond view. So settle in, allow your thoughts to slow, and let the night gently carry you away. Larkspur Bay rested at the edge of the world in a way that was difficult to explain. The maps showed a coastline, a curve of land meeting the sea, but they did not show the silence that lived there. They did not show how the air seemed to soften sound, or how the horizon often blurred into something uncertain. The town itself was small and worn with time. Wooden houses stood close together, their paint faded by years of salt and wind. Windows reflected the pale light of the sky, and curtains moved gently even when there was no breeze. The harbor was the heart of the town. A long stretch of weathered docks extended into the water, each plank shaped by footsteps that had passed over it for decades. The posts were thick and dark, wrapped with old rope that creaked softly as it shifted. During the day, the harbor seemed ordinary. Fishing nets hung to dry, their fibers catching the light. Small tools rested in quiet corners, left exactly where they had been the day before. The scent of salt and wood and distant seaweed drifted through the air, but even in daylight, there was a stillness that never fully left. At night, that stillness deepened. Fog rolled in slowly, as if it had all the time in the world. It slipped between buildings, across rooftops, and down toward the water. It softened the edges of everything it touched, turning the harbor into a place without clear boundaries. Mara had grown up with this rhythm. She lived in a small room above the harbor office, where a single window looked out across the docks. Each morning, she opened that window and let the cool air drift in. Each evening, she closed it just before the fog became too thick. Her work was simple. She recorded arrivals and departures that rarely happened. She maintained ledgers filled with neat handwriting, each line steady and careful. Most days, she wrote down nothing at all. And yet, she continued. Because the harbor required it. Because routine brought comfort. Because some things were done simply because they had always been done. There was only one part of the harbor that did not follow routine. Every night, just after midnight, a foghorn echoed across the water, low, distant, and impossibly present. The sound did not belong to Larkspur Bay. Mara knew the harbor well enough to recognize every creak, every shifting rope, every distant call of seabirds. But the foghorn came from somewhere beyond all of that. It moved through the fog in a way that felt deliberate, not loud enough to disturb, not soft enough to ignore. It simply arrived. And then it faded. One night, as Mara sat at her desk, she noticed how the sound seemed to change the room itself. The wooden walls felt closer. The air felt cooler. Even the faint ticking of the clock slowed, as if it were listening too. She set her pen down carefully and stood. The floor beneath her feet was smooth from years of use, and it creaked in a familiar, comforting way. She crossed the room and opened the window. The fog was already there, waiting. It pressed softly against the frame, cool and damp, carrying the scent of salt and something older. Mara leaned slightly forward, looking out. The harbor lights glowed faintly, their reflections stretching across the water in long, trembling lines. Beyond them, there was only gray. The foghorn had already faded, but the feeling it left behind remained. The night stretched on, slow and endless, and with each passing moment, everything grew quieter. In the mornings, the harbor always returned to its familiar shape. The fog lifted just enough to reveal the docks, the posts, and the still water below. Nothing seemed out of place. And yet, Mara began to notice small changes. At first, it was only the footprints. They appeared near the far end of the pier, where fewer people walked. Dark marks against the wood, still damp, as if they had been left only moments before. They led from the water inward, never outward. Mara followed them once, stepping carefully beside each mark. They ended abruptly near one of the posts. There was nothing there. No boat, no person, no explanation, only a length of rope, tied securely, its fibers slightly darker than the rest. She reached out and touched it. It was cold, colder than the air around it. She pulled her hand back slowly. The harbor remained still. The night stretched on, slow and endless. And with each passing moment, everything grew quieter. As days passed, the changes became easier to notice. Crates began appearing along the docks. They were different sizes, some small enough to carry, others too heavy to move alone. Their wood was aged and rough, marked by scratches and faint impressions that suggested long journeys. None of them bore names or symbols. They simply existed. Mara watched as townspeople moved around them without comment. No one questioned where they came from. No one seemed curious about what they contained. It was as if the crates had always been there, as if they belonged. One evening, Mara decided to sit by the water longer than usual. She brought a small lantern with her, its light steady and warm. She placed it beside her and let her feet hover just above the surface of the sea. The water was darker at night, not just in color, but in presence. It reflected less. It revealed less. It simply held its depth in silence. Midnight came quietly. The foghorn sounded. This time, it felt closer. Mara closed her eyes. She listened, and beneath the low tone she began to hear something else. A slow, rhythmic creaking. The gentle shift of something large moving through water. The faintest suggestion of footsteps on wood. Her eyes opened slowly. The fog had thickened, but within it, something was forming. At first it was only a shadow, a darker shape within the gray. But as Mara continued to watch, the shape grew clearer. A line, a curve, the suggestion of a structure rising from the water. A ship. It did not emerge all at once. It revealed itself slowly, as if it were remembering how to exist. The hull appeared first, dark and still. Then the faint outline of a deck. Then the suggestion of tall, unmoving structures that reached upward into the fog. There were no lights, no movement. And yet, it did not feel empty. Mara remained completely still. Her breathing was slow, her thoughts quiet. She felt no urgency to move closer, no need to call out. Only a deep, steady awareness. The night stretched on, slow and endless. And with each passing moment, everything grew quieter. And in that moment, something shifted. Not suddenly, not loudly, but gently, like a memory returning. The fog seemed to part just slightly, enough for Mara to see more of the ship. The wood along its side looked worn but intact. The edges were smooth, shaped by time rather than damage. The surface held a faint sheen, as if it were always just slightly wet. A rope extended from the ship toward the dock. Mara followed its line with her eyes. It connected to the very post she had touched before. And as she watched, it began to tighten, slowly, steadily, without sound. Mara stepped closer. The lantern behind her cast a soft glow across the wood, but it did not reach the ship. That remained within the fog. She reached out and placed her hand on the rope. It felt firm, real, gently pulling, not drawing her forward but acknowledging her presence. For a moment she stood there, her hand resting against it. The sea moved softly below. The fog drifted slowly around her. Everything felt balanced between two quiet states. And then, just as gently as it had appeared, the ship began to fade. Its edges softened. Its shape dissolved, until there was nothing left but fog and stillness. The rope loosened. The harbor returned to silence. Mara stayed where she was for a long time. She did not try to understand. She did not try to explain. She simply remained. The lantern flickered softly behind her. The water moved in slow, steady patterns. By the time the first light of morning began to appear, the fog had thinned. The harbor returned to its familiar form. Empty, quiet, unchanged. Near the post, a new crate rested on the dock. It was smaller than the others. Its surface was smoother, less worn. Mara approached it slowly. She placed her hand on its lid. It was cool, but not cold. She left it closed. Some things did not need to be opened. Some things were enough simply as they were. She stood and looked out across the water. The horizon stretched endlessly, calm and pale. And in that quiet moment, she understood something simple. The harbor was never empty. It had always been receiving, always been holding, always been waiting. The night stretched on, slow and endless, and with each passing moment, everything grew quieter. And as the night carried on, the world softened once more. The harbor rested beneath its quiet veil. The fog returned in gentle layers. The water lay still. And somewhere beyond sight, something continued to arrive. Thank you for listening to Stillwater Chronicles. And I will see you soon in the next story.